All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for attending this Tech Talk and webinar session with us. I'm Chris Featherstone, Worldwide Business Development Leader for Amazon Transcribe. And with me, I'm super lucky, I've got Kostub Konke, who's the Senior Product Manager for Transcribe, as well as Andrew Kane, who's the Principal AI and ML Specialist Solution Architect. So what we're going to do today is really go through an exciting new feature that we've launched over the last couple of weeks called Amazon Transcribe Analytics. And I think when we actually go through it and get into the depth, our goal and our hope is that you actually really find a lot of value in what we're talking about and how we're applying this to market. And at the same time, we want you just to get in and get your hands dirty and really, utilize these services to pull these unbelievably valuable insights out of the conversations that you're having with your customers today. So let's get started. When we see this in terms of just the whole overall customer experience challenge, we're seeing this from a couple of different views, not only from those that are offering contact center products, but also from the customers that are coming to us that are just asking us simple questions like, I need to understand what my customer issues are. So we see that, in terms of some data points here that we actually, derived from some research that PwC did, that really, 70%, 73% of those that are surveyed, which actually surveys are actually even flawed as well, are, really looking at this as customer experiences driving their overall perspective in everything they're doing, which is awesome. Now, that's in part due to that a lot of the really great consumer experiences out there have now cast a shadow and an unconscious bias towards every single thing that we do. So because of my interaction with this company or that company, I expect that my government agency or that my utility or that my doctor or that my other interactions that I have with others should have that same level of experience that, let's say, some of the consumer electronics or consumer goods are out there that provide. So we also see that, indicative of that survey, only people that are mad really take those surveys, right? And they, part of that too is that we see that customer experience will absolutely disappear and the brand loyalty will disappear if they've had one bad interaction on a phone with another person. And then we see that, in terms of more than 1/4 of these companies are really utilizing just their their contact center and looking at it as a cost center. And so we see a lot of these, these challenges. Now, on top of that, add all of the, the latest pandemics and things, and we're starting to see now even more of a divide between things like the psychology of people working from home, in addition to creating more, worse actual customer experiences because now their employees are disengaged from the company even that much more. So there's a lot of really interesting things that we need to be able to get ahead of and really dive into. And we're hoping that you'll see the value in these technologies that provide. Again, like I said, the beauty of these use cases that we're map to every single industry, really anything where there's humans that are interacting with each other, whether it be customer sales or outbound sales, or like we say, conference calls and meetings and things like that. Anywhere where there's two people that are communicating or more than two people communicating, and we want to derive out what's being said and some of the really neat and rich information about those conversations, this is what we're talking about. And I love these use cases because they're broad across and applicable across every single industry and every single organizational size. So in my day job, I actually focus on our speech recognition product called Amazon Transcribe. And when I actually interact with customers and we get them, we're talking on the phone or we're talking across, meetings or whatever, a lot of it is I've got a really complex system in place. I've had this contact center in place for the last 10 to 15 years. I've got everything you can think of that I've bolted onto this system to really understand my customers. However, I still don't know why my customers are calling me. I don't know really who they are. I'm trying to get ahead of, for a long time, we were just a cost center. Now we're a strategic asset. We're trying to derive as much data as possible, but I still don't know how to solve their problems, what their problems are, and what I can do to improve those problems. I see it every single day. And these are with these existing investments that are there that aren't providing the data that's needed. They're providing a lot of really rich operational information, but they're not providing the core data. And so we see, in terms of just the customer challenges of, long unresolved calls, we see really negative disposition. We see just the ability to monitor the quality of agent just absolutely non-existent. In fact, you guys have probably been there where, our number one job for supervisors is to ask them to comb through, a set of recorded calls to try to derive out and write down and put together coaching scenarios around what's missing. Was there compliance phrases missed? All that kind of stuff. And, and it's a lot of time wasted, that they could actually be doing other things and being more proactive. We see, in terms of just, like we talked about, a compliance phrase or a missed, something that was missaid or a lack of education, and really diving into this from a quality management perspective. How do we know if the coaching that is going on is even effective? I mean, think about, define irony. We're sending our supervisors to try to get quality out of, let's say, some core, data, but they're only able to get to maybe 1% of the actual recorded calls. And that's what we base our ground truth on to actually coach our agents. So we miss out on a lot of data, and just in terms of just lack of visibility all over the board. So in terms of what we're doing is we're really providing services and features in our artificial intelligence services to combat these issues and give you more information and more insights to make recommendations and to create actionable insights off of that data. Well, a lot of times people come back and say, "But Chris, don't you have this in your current call center offering yourself from Amazon?" And the answer is absolutely. We do have a cloud-based contact center ourselves called Amazon Connect. However, in the world, there's a lot of prem-based systems and non-Connect-based environments. So we went ahead and actually built Contact Center Intelligence, which is a program and a set of accelerators for our customers to utilize to take the AI or the artificial intelligence building block services of language and speech and apply it to their existing contact center and really drive innovation off of the investments that they've already made. And so we have one side, a fully packaged product, and on the other side, a set of building blocks. And sometimes that can be paralyzing for both groups in terms of, hey, I don't have the ability to go to an Amazon Connect and lift and shift my existing environment. But at the same time, I don't have in my organization maybe the attitude and the aptitude of wiring up all these building blocks that you actually have for AI and ML. So part of what we did with Transcribe Call Analytics is dramatically shortened the time to value and the technologies by getting up to speed and building a lot of these key features in place for you so you don't have to do it. Okay, so they're predefined, but they give you the ability to wire these environments against your existing call center environment, right? These are the same technologies that power up Amazon, Amazon Connect and Contact Lens and Wisdom and all those great features in that fully packaged product. But if you're in an environment where you have an existing investment in telephony or an existing investment in a advanced call distribution type of platform, that are out there that are very common in prem or cloud, or you have existing, reporting environments and you want to utilize this information or utilize these services, that's the goal of what we want to provide, is a set of APIs that have predefined, common areas that are targeted towards actual call center and calling environments. Okay. So again, the Transcribe Call Analytics API is all centered around, shortening that time to value and really providing a rich set of functionality for you guys to utilize and derive out not only what's in the conversation and pull out that rich information, but also the rich value of what's not in the conversation and a lot of the metadata about the conversation. So to double click further, I'm going to turn this over to Kostub, and he's actually going to dive in and give you a deep dive into the services that he and his team built.
Thanks, Chris. Now that we know what Transcribe Call Analytics is all about, let's take a closer look at all the capabilities that are part of this API. With Transcribe Call Analytics, you get a host of different insights. You get turn-by-turn transcripts, you get detailed call characteristics, you get sentiment analysis, you get automated call categorization, you get issue detection, and you also get sensitive data redaction. Now, all of these outputs are available to you in an Amazon S3 bucket, and you can access them with just a few clicks without the need for any machine learning expertise on your own. Let's dive into each of these capabilities a little further to learn a little bit more. So let's start with turn-by-turn transcripts. With transcribe call analytics, you can get a transcript that is broken down into both customer and agent turns. This makes it very easy to read and very easy to understand and quickly parse through the content of what is within that call transcript. So rather than reading a block of text, now you actually get a transcript that is broken into agent and customer conversation turns. To ensure that this transcript is customized to your business, you can also optionally use custom vocabulary, custom language model, and vocabulary filtering. These features are designed to allow you to boost accuracy of your business specific words, things like product names or brand names that are particularly unique to you and don't apply generally outside of your own business. You can also filter out certain words that you do not want to see in your call transcripts. Transcribe call analytics supports a host of different languages as well. You can transcribe call recordings in languages such as English, Spanish, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, Hindi, Arabic, Korean, Japanese, and Mandarin. And we'll continue to keep adding support for these languages in the future. So you can really handle all the different conversations that you have based on customers in different parts of the world. Next, you also get a set of detailed call characteristics with Transcribe Call Analytics. Now, what are these detailed call analytics that you can find with Transcribe Call Analytics? You get things like non-talk time, you get loudness, you get interruption, and you get talk speed. All of these metrics are critical to managing a really good customer experience for your business. For example, you can identify scenarios such as abnormal durations of silence, loud speech, frequent interruptions, and comprehension issues. For example, calls with non-talk time that greater than 5 minutes are probably not going as well as you would like them to, and they're not probably going to translate into a good customer experience since no one likes to be put on hold on long periods of time. So with transcribe call analytics, you can look at non-talk time and identify these particular types of conversations. Um, Similarly, if you find that an agent or customer has raised their voice on a particular call due to anger or frustration, you may want to take a closer look at that to understand, what really happened. Was it the customer who was angry or frustrated about something, or did the agent themselves raise their voice? And do you want to coach them and, ask them to better handle such situations in the future? If your agent is frequently interrupting your customer, you may also want to coach your agent to be a better listener and sort of hear out your customer to make sure that the customer understands that you empathize with their problem and you make sure that they feel heard. On the other hand, if your agent is speaking too fast, you may also want to ask them to slow down so that customers can understand them better, and then the customers don't ask the agents to repeat themselves frequently. So all of these different call characteristics are crucial and essential to deciphering different parts of the customer experience on a particular call. Um, the other important indicator of customer experience is sentiment. Um, Earlier, if you had to use sentiment along with call transcripts, you had to use Amazon Comprehend for sentiment analysis, and then you had to use for transcriptions you had to use Amazon Transcribe, and you had to use these two APIs separately. But now with Transcribe Call Analytics, you get the transcript along with the sentiment for both the agent as well as customer in just a single API. You can find the overall sentiment. You can find sentiment by the different quarters of the call. And you can also get turn by turn sentiment for each conversation turn for both the customer and the agent. Um, you can, using this sentiment analysis, you can easily look for sentiment shifts within a call and try to identify what is causing those shifts. For example, you could look at calls where customer sentiment shifted from positive to negative and try to identify, was it something that the agent said, or there was something that the customer wanted and they didn't get, which caused that sentiment shift. On the flip side, what you could also do is look at calls where the customer sentiment shifted from negative to positive, which means you did something right. And you could actually look at these set of sample calls and put them together in sort of an agent coaching training program so that agents have some sample calls to listen to or look at to understand how they can perform better and how they can serve customers better. One of the top points, pain points in quality management is usually that when you're looking at calls, you need to look at call wrap-up codes or call issue codes to understand what a call was all about. Now, these codes are usually manually chosen by agents after calls complete and are usually subjective in nature or prone to errors. With Transcribe Call Analytics, you get a completely new capability called automated call categorization that makes it easier for you to automatically tag calls. So you can look for the presence or absence of any keywords or phrases that are uttered by either the customer or if it's the agent or if it's both. You can also look for conversation characteristics that we talked about before, like non-talk time and interruptions. And these occurrences can be throughout the conversation, or they can be at the beginning of the call, or it could be at the end of the call. You can then tag these calls based on rules that you want to define based on your needs. And you can completely avoid the need for having contact wrap-up codes or contact issue codes. The key benefit here is that you can save your agents time in having to select these wrap-up codes, and you can also get better accuracy in tagging and tracking issues. You can use this capability to look for common scenarios like escalation requests or account cancellations. For example, you can look for phrases such as, I want to talk to a manager, or you could also look for something like, I want to cancel my account. And you could then track those calls and take appropriate actions to prevent customer churn. On the other hand, you can also use call categorization for script compliance or policy adherence use cases. For example, if you want to ensure your agents always greet your customer with the greeting, thank you for being a valued customer, you can set up a category to check and look for that. Once you set up this category, all calls that match this rule will be tagged accordingly. And then you can look for even the absence of such greetings and then go ahead and start coaching your agents to make sure that those greetings are always mentioned on calls to customers. You can set up these categories, and you can also get multiple category hits per call. And then you can track these categories over a period of time to identify any trends, such as, let's say, if you want to look for an increase or decrease in escalation requests, or maybe you want to look for changes in account cancellation requests, or you want to track how script compliance is trending over, let's say, 6 months or a year's worth of calls. You could do that all on the basis of the tags that you get with these call categories. Now, in conjunction with automated call categorization, Transcribe Call Analytics also offers an issue detection capability. Now, this capability allows you to discover issues that were previously unknown to you. You can find the shortest set of contiguous words in a particular conversation that indicate why the customer is calling, right? So we've built a custom machine learning model just for issue detection that is trained to identify such issues across different domains and across different industries, whether that's financial services, whether that's retail, whether that's travel and hospitality. The model can identify issues across all these different ranges of calls. Unlike categorization, the key difference with issue detection is that you don't have to specify any rules. You don't have to specify keywords, you don't have to specify phrases, you don't have to specify criteria or conditions. Issue detection just works straight out of the box without any configuration needs or without any model training required on your end. Issue detection also allows you to find this entire reason why the customer is calling, and it helps you do away the work of actually having to listen to an entire call recording, which can be 10 minutes or it could be an hour long recording. And it also does away with the need to read complete call transcripts, right? So you don't have to read 1,000-word or 2,000-word call transcript just to understand what the issue is. Issue detection can quickly identify that for you. As an example, let's say if a customer is calling about closing their bank account, or maybe they're requesting a refund on an audit, issue detection model can quickly identify the words in the transcript that represent that reason and then flag it for you to review. Finally, one of the key features of Transcribe Call Analytics is the ability to redact sensitive data such as names, addresses, credit card details, and social security numbers. Now, this redaction removes this sensitive information not just from the call transcript, but also from the audio recording itself. In case of call transcripts, we replace the redacted information with the word PII. While for audio recordings, we take the redacted audio segments and we replace them with silence. So you can't hear the PII mentions that are being made by either the customer or the agent. This capability is really sort of set up to allow you to control who has access to redacted and unredacted data based on your business need. For the vast majority of your organization, you would probably want to just provide redacted information access to individuals. But there could be a few cases where you want to have a few limited personnel who need access to unredacted data to address or deep dive or investigate customer issues. And you could selectively provide access to the unredacted data. This allows you to basically efficiently control how sensitive customer information or sensitive data overall is handled within your organization. Now, as you can see, there are these bunch of really interesting capabilities in Amazon Transcribe Call Analytics. And we're excited to see what you do with it. I'm going to hand it off now to my colleague Andrew, who's going to show you how those outputs actually look and how you can use them. And then he's also going to walk you through a brief demo of these capabilities. So here's Andrew to take you over.
Thank you, Kostap. So before we go into some of the details on the actual output data you can get from Call Analytics and see some of the visualizations that you can actually make in your own applications, I want to quickly show you a few points in the actual console itself and demo some of these things live. Now, all the features of Call Analytics are actually available within the AWS console. So you can see on the left, on the top left, the standard transcription options and the other ones we have available for Transcribe Medical. But today we're just interested in the ones in Call Analytics. The first thing I want to show you is how easy and quickly it is to actually create your own custom categories. Now, as Kostap mentioned, you may want to have lots of different categories, some to say, did the agent have the correct opening greeting? Were they saying the correct closing remarks? Or do you want to find out exactly when they didn't say the correct closing remarks? And again, use that information to feed it into your training schemes for the agents. But to create one, you can do a new category in just a few clicks. So if you start by creating the category, let's call this interruption 5 seconds. Now you can create these things from scratch. You can build up a lot of rows, but we do have a few templates built in automatically. And one of them actually is for interruptions. So if I click that, it will fill in a lot of the information for me initially, which does save a bit of time. And what we want to do is say as well, if someone actually interrupted me for, say, 5 seconds at any time during the call when the customer was speaking, I want to know about it. But more importantly, I want to build a more complex rule. So you can add multiple rules to the same category. Now, there may be interruptions. These things may happen when people are just talking to each other, asking for information and just swapping data. But what gets more useful is if actually, I want to try and see if we've had these interruptions to the customer. And for the entire call, the customer is unhappy. And by creating a rule such as this, it means it'll be triggered when you get the combination of these things occurring during the call. So you can really take action when your agents are calling or driving this sort of bad behavior with their callers. And we can create that. And going forward, when we create a new transcription job, which I'll do in a second, these ones now take into account as part of the analytics. Now, the job itself, for any of you who have actually run transcription jobs before, this will be reasonably familiar. When you actually go to create a job, you type in the usual information, such as actually name the job. And then you get a choice of using the general models that we have within Transcribe or a custom language model that you may have defined yourselves for your own domain. If you have one, you can actually use them. But if you don't have one, if you're just doing general transcription, you can just use the general models. Now, again, you can pick a specific language, such as US English, or you can choose to do automatic language identification. And you get a choice for all the languages that we actually support. And again, I use this quite a lot myself, being Scottish, to try and tell the difference between US English and Scottish English is quite important. But I know this one's US English call, so I'm just going to stick with that option. Scroll down some more, and you can actually quickly then set up the actual URL for the call that I've got. With that. I know that my agent is on channel 1. You can choose this. Of course, this is dependent on your own telephony system. Then you can choose where to deliver the output data. This can be the server-side bucket or your own customer-specified bucket. And of course, just like with standard Transcribe, if you're going to put it to your own bucket, you have control of the encryption that we use for the data. But I'll skip that for this quick demo. And you have to have an IAM role, of course, for the whole system to actually work. So we have one I've created already, but you can create one on the fly if you like. And then go to the next step. Now, this is where we actually set up the other options which are standard in Transcribe. Would you like to redact the content? Absolutely. Are we going to do some basic vocabulary filtering based on filters I've built out already? Yes, let's take out all that profanity because no one likes to see that in the calls. And custom vocab, if you have one available, of course, for your particular use case or particular domain. This is a call from a bank we're going to be running through. Let's turn on banking term customization just to make sure we pick out those words. And at the bottom, before it all kicks off, we actually give an output of all the categories we're going to be looking for as a course or through the course of this call. And you get the choice to quickly go and create another one if you think you need something else. And once you hit the create job, off it goes. And hopefully within a few minutes, we'll actually have the full transcription available to look at. So while that job is running in the background, I'm going to go through some of the outputs that you can generate from the call analytics system. I'll basically go through everything that I've mentioned and try and show you how the output looks from the Transcribe job, and also how you can visualize it yourselves in your own applications. So call sentiment. So as well as giving sentiment indicators in the transcript itself, which we will see later, call analytics will also generate other call level sentiment data. So for each speaker on the call, we will generate a sentiment value for each quarter of that call. Now this ranges from +5, which is very positive, to -5, which is extremely negative. And we also generate a whole call sentiment score for each speaker. Now this lets you actually track the trend of that sentiment over the course of the call for the agent and the customer, and lets you see how things have been going. Lets you see the direction of that call, because let's be honest, many customers are actually unhappy when they first call, but hopefully by the end of it, they become much happier. And in this example you have in the call, we end up graphing it in a demonstration application that we'll show later, such as this, where we can graph nice and simply the course of sentiment over the call. And we can show on a simple sort of color dashboard how things have progressed through each quarter, and the color strength that indicates how good or how bad that particular part is. Now we do have a number of detailed call characteristics, as Costa mentioned. So the text transcripts themselves were always available from Transcribe, but now we've added many more pieces of data to it. So I'll go through some of those data points now that are in analytics. And you must recall, as we've mentioned, these are now all natively generated within the service. There's no need to call in the outside service. There's no need for you to configure really anything. Everything we talk about now will be generated by the service against every single call that you process. One thing that's useful to look at is actually talk time. So for this, we actually provide an overview statistics for each of the 2 speakers on the call. Now, if there's just one speaker, which is unusual, but it is actually possible, then of course, just that one vocal speaker is reported. Now, we also report non-talk time. We give you a list of quiet segments in the call, although this example just shows the one. We tell you when that quiet period actually started, how long it was, and when it finished. And we give you actually an aggregate total as well for the non-talk time throughout the total call. This lets you actually see how these quiet spaces have happened. It could be while an agent is going to look up some information, or maybe just be a huge pause where there's hold music or something going on. But it lets you see at a glance how much of that call was essentially being unproductive. And without the information inside your applications, you can graph something like this, which shows a simple bar chart of one against the other with percentages of who's talking the most on the call. Of course, if there's no non-talk time, then that aspect is missing from the graph. We don't output the metrics for you. But if it's there, you can actually just show this and at a glance, just see who's doing the most talking, which can be quite a useful thing to have. The second thing we're going to show is for every speak segment that we have in the call, we'll give it a sentiment tag. And this will be either positive, negative, or neutral. Now, no scores are going to be available at this level in the transcripts. Scores are only really there at the per quarter or the whole call level. Now, for every second of speech in a particular speech segment, we also assign an average decibel loudness level for each second, which lets you identify situations where either the speaker is getting quiet or they've begun to raise their voice, which is very useful if you then tie that raised voice to the sentiment of that speech segment from that particular speaker. Now, we also indicate where there's been an interruption by either of the speakers. Now, these are output as a list, as typically you want to analyze or visualize interrupt trends as a whole across a call. But we give you some very precise timestamps where the interrupt actually happened. So it's very easy to weave this into your per turn transcripts, which I'll show later. Now, in the demo application, which again we'll show the details for later, we pull all of these metrics together along with the non-talk time data I mentioned, and we create a single multi-speaker graph with all of the metrics lining up, letting you see at a glance exactly how the call went. And you can see clearly here, this blue bar towards the right is where everything went quiet for a short second. The orange bar shows where one is interrupting the other, and you can see the sentiment trends as the call is going on. And as you can see, generally speaking, the agent here is talking consistently loud or at the consistent volume level across the course of the call, and the customer waxes and wanes and how loud and how quiet they actually are. Now, you saw earlier how we go about creating categories. It's really quite straightforward. And it's really easy to find out things whether a call agent is using the right greeting, the right closing remarks, etc. And it's all very useful. But how do we actually identify that in the transcripts? How do we tell you what's been going on? The first thing we do is really simple at the high level. We list all of the categories that we have found in the call. Now, there's no information at this point of where they are in the call. We just give you the simple list. And this is actually really because we need the names of the categories because they're entirely user defined. You are building these, you are creating these, not us. And so the only way to know what keys to look up in the results JSON file is by actually using the keys that we have here. So once you have a list of all the ones we have actually found, we can then provide you with the points of interest of every instance of every category that we have found. So it gives you the timestamp references for each speech segment that triggered it, and you can see quite easily in the call transcript later where these things have happened. Now, in the demo application, we use this in 2 ways. And the first is actually quite simple. We give you a simple header table outlining which ones we actually have found, how many, and where they are in the transcript. We also highlight it in the transcript directly, which again we'll show in a few minutes. The last major thing to really show is issue detection. Now, prior to call analytics, if you wanted to detect issues on a call, you would have to create a large amount of labeled call transcript data, then build an AI ML model yourself to act as a custom classifier. Now, this can be done in Amazon SageMaker, but many customers chose to use Amazon Comprehend for this instead. But it's still quite a lot of work to build out, test, and maintain such custom models. So with call analytics, this is now included, and it's called on your behalf whenever a job is being processed by the system. And we insert information about anything that we find into the results JSON file. And the best part about it really is it's managed and maintained by AWS. There's literally nothing for you to do. It is always there. Now, within any speech segment that has had an issue detected, we will insert this JSON block. which tells you whereabouts in the content it actually is, or where it was found. And we show you the whole sentence, of course, but we give you an exact indication of where it's going to be. In the demo application, we show this in two ways. The first is quite simple. It's much like the categories that we showed earlier. We show the speaker, we show the timestamp, and we show the actual text, those few limited words that triggered this issue, to give you an idea of what this call is going to be about. Now, in the transcript, we actually show it in more detail, but we'll get to that next. So there is a demo application that we have built. We'll give you the links to for it shortly, and it will generate a Word document based on a process job from the call analytics. So what it actually generates really is, it starts off with this header information, which shows you all the very useful information on the left, which is the options you have with Transcribe when you begun this actual job. So you want to know at a glance, was PII enabled? Was what kind of filtering were we using? Was any custom vocab being used? Information like that. And we also call out the sentiment and the talk time at the very top. Make it nice bold header information, just to give you at first glance what is going on, so you can see what's happening. That's followed up quite quickly by the graph we showed with all the conversation metrics on. So again, before you get to the transcript, you have this more visual information to give you a view of what's actually going on, to see whether it's worth looking any further into the transcripts. We then pull together all the other tables for detected categories, detected issues, and the actual call sentiments. Now, once we've had that, we can start looking at the transcript itself. Now, we show the obvious things. Of course, we show what the actual speech text was itself. We show the duration. We show who was speaking, at what point in the call this was actually going ahead. This is, and we also show this sentiment indicator. That this is common in all call center scenarios. But as you'll find in those situations, each line of sentiment is generally neutral, and more frequently neutral than anything else in call center scenarios. So this is why we really have the scores on a per quarter level or call level rather than line by line. As you see here, the opening salvo of the conversation are all quite neutral, and it's only once the conversation gets really going that the happy faces and smiley faces actually come into play. Now you see as well at the very top, we have a very first line. We're calling out the category the greeting has been found. This particular custom category that I defined is there because one of them actually was to say thank you for calling the bank. So just by saying that, we can tell that at this point in the call, half a second in, they actually said the opening greeting that they've been trained to actually say. And it does mean you can show at a glance the greeting was said, it was done. You don't have to trawl through the transcripts to work it out. It's just there. Next thing worth calling out is when we actually have issues in the call. Again, because we know which line it was on, we know which words triggered it, we can be quite explicit and say, at the very top of the call, we've got the issue. It's highlighted. You can see at a glance in the transcript what it was all about. And again, further down, we show you the interruption flag. So we know that at this point, the agent interrupted the customer. In this case, we don't exactly know why on the transcript because we have redaction enabled. So with redaction enabled, we actually replace all the words that match sensitive categories that Costa mentioned, such as names, addresses, credit card numbers, social security numbers. I will blank those out and just replace them with the word PII in brackets. Now, what we also do, which is a very powerful addition to Transcribe with this new call analytics, is we also output the redacted version of the audio file. So that's delivered essentially to the same location in your Amazon S3 bucket as the JSON results file is. And it means you've got access to the original call audio or the redacted call audio to use as you see fit in your client application. As you say, you might want some managers to be able to listen to the non-redacted call, but your actual call center agents, when they're reviewing their calls afterwards, they only get to listen to the redacted version. And it's one more thing that you can do to maintain privacy of your customers within your call center environment. And the last thing, which is always useful to see in any sort of speech recognition system, is give a map or a view of the word confidence scores that we found across the whole transcript. So we show the word confidence scores, which we put into some really largest bucket ranges, and we sort of graph everything at the end to give you a view of where we were compared to the mean of the call. And at this sample call, the actual average confidence score was 97.36%. As you can see, most of them are above the red line, which is the mean. It's quite busy up there. And of course, there's a few outliers of occasional words that were mispronounced or perhaps were slurred or perhaps, excuse me, it just didn't quite work out the accent of the caller for that particular phrase. Now, this demo code application is available in GitHub repository in the AWS samples area of GitHub. And in there, you'll find the actual Python code to actually create the Word document you just saw. And it has sample input audio files, sample redacted audio files, and also a sample Word output. So if you want to go and see how it's done and just look at the output in more detail, just go and take a look at those files. Or you can go in there yourself and take the code and use that as a basis for your own applications. So that's it from me. I'll now hand this back to Chris to finish off the rest of this talk.
Okay, well, Costa and Andrew, thank you so much. Costa first, thank you for building some phenomenal features into Transcribe. And Andrew, thank you for demoing, aptly like you do every day, just how valuable these features and resources can be. I think the key is especially when you see all the data and categories that you can pull together into one view, just the amazing amount of data that we generate on, just in terms of not only the categories, but plus the sentiment and all those other aspects, give us the richest sense of really how to score these calls. And when we're talking to customers, as you know, in order to enable like those key pain points of not being able to score calls or really get the quality out of it, having this type of information gives that much more information centered around things that I can make actionable, because I can also take subsets of that and say, well, what does sentiment look like with interruptions? Or what does, non-talk time look like against maybe, some of the other key metrics? Is that an indicator of lack of education, or what does that look like? And so these are going to be really, really rich features for our customers and for you out there in the world to be able to use. So let's talk about next steps. So like we talked about, the key business benefits that we really wanted to drive were really centered around how can we actually give you the ability to take what you have today and ensure better customer satisfaction. We have NPS, we have CSAT, we have internal metrics, which are okay, but at the same time, they don't give a holistic view if you're being successful or not. What does coaching effectiveness scores look like? What do overall call confidence scores look like? Things like that. What does it look like in terms of scoring the calls for compliance needs and making sure that we can hit all those? I mean, the key part is when Andrew showed that you could actually add the PII, the beauty is we can also output that without the PII and stuff for you. So we have a lot of options there too, but just in terms of what does that look like to boost customer satisfaction, we're giving you all this information so that you can actually generate the recommendations to drive the automated or the manual actions needed in order to know that you're actually increasing your customer satisfaction and give you those dials and markers. At the same time, because we've added all of this rich capability into the features like Costa went through, that's going to reduce a ton of cost centered around, the outcomes of what happens in terms of hopefully reducing attrition within the agent environments and just providing better notes and information about, the post-call analytics. And then overall, in terms of the dev time to get these systems up and running, reduce that time frame, exponentially. So we should see a ton of efficiencies across all of the sites. The other piece that I'm super excited about and I'm very passionate about is making sure that we improve agent satisfaction. Again, because of things like the pandemics, we've naturally created more separation away from the agents and the organization. These types of tools help us come prepared and give us the ability to be more engaged and provide more information so that we can actually, help these folks create qualitative metrics and know how they're impacting the business and the value they're driving, as opposed to just measuring to average handle time or some quantitative metrics, which will run people out every day. And then lastly, just in terms of all the overall business benefit of, seeing this much information, we can derive out not only how our customers are doing, what our customers' needs are, and those pain points before, and knowing why our customers are calling by the simple definition of, let's say, having issue detection there. I can guarantee you that, that just having issue detection, it's going to come up with some scenarios based off a lot of the models that we've generated in years of work on with other customers, that it's going to provide issues that you thought that you knew, that you didn't really know, but now you do because you actually have things in place, right? Hugely valuable. That married with all the other data that's being collected from an organization, targeting the operational side of things, but also the business and the downstream, again, impacts that we can make because we have this information, and just in terms of the automated, insights that we can generate as well as the recommendations is absolutely, off the charts valuable. So to get more tactical with some of the other areas, I want to make sure that you also know that in terms of the support for languages and regions, right, because we've combined, some things like having Amazon Transcribe and Amazon Comprehend to make these things work, we're also, want to make sure that you know which languages are available for it today, as well as which regions it's available for you to utilize it. One thing I should add is that in its current iteration, it is targeted for batch or recorded calls today. We're working on those for streaming, but that'll be soon coming. But those are for batch and recorded calls today. So with the region and the languages, let's talk about pricing for a minute. So let me give you a simple example. This we actually have for Northern Virginia. And I think the key is that what Costab's built in the product and what we saw from Andrew, that all those services are based in a per minute model based in Transcribe Call Analytics. It's very similar to the difference that we have between Transcribe Medical, and now Transcribe Call Analytics. And you can think of them as 3 separate services. The one caveat, though, is that additional charges may apply for utilizing custom language models, but that goes across all of the services. So as we think about this from a perspective of 2 million minutes, again, issue detection and, loudness scores and all that kind of stuff is all built in. As we look at that for the 2 million minutes a month, if we take the, our usage and apply that towards these, it's a progressive pricing model. And we've gone away from the traditional just, per minute pricing into a progressive tiered pricing model per month. So if we take the 2 million minutes and we say the first 250,000, times that, in terms of the 0.03 cents a minute, plus the second tier, plus the third tier, that gives us our output tier. Again, we wanted to make sure that as there's more usage, that the pricing becomes, cheaper and more discounted over that usage. Again, just a simple example I wanted to call out. Now, one thing I will also add to this is that depending on the region that you're in, the pricing may vary a bit. So those results may vary, but I want to give you just an example of what that looks like. In terms of additional resources, make sure you get out to the website. There's a ton of information there, documentation on the APIs, documentation on blogs, how to set this up, all the pricing that we talked briefly about, and just a well of resources that you can actually get to. And in the same time, go and actually take a spin with it in the console. Just the richness and the capabilities that Costab and team have built into the console alone give us the ability to really create multiple rules that we didn't have before in order to actually really figure out what the call categorization and the call characterization and some of those issue detection things are. Again, the richness of Transcribe Call Analytics is really centered in not only what we can derive out of the speech recognition and utilize natural language processing to figure out what was spoken, like sentiment and key phrases and terms and things like that, but it's also around the rich set of features and capabilities of what's not spoken and the metadata about the call and the call classification, call characterization. So I urge you to get out there, utilize the service, give us the feedback, let's make it better, and hopefully this was well worth your time. On behalf of my esteemed colleagues, Costab and Andrew, we thank you for your time and we hope you have a great day.